Okay, so I have 11:59 and we'll get started in another minute. Please do feel free to utilize the chat. I've put all of my contact details there as well as a link if you'd like to schedule some time with me to have a more personal one-on-one to handle any questions you have. Spend some time walking through the state of your business and how I can be of service. So please get ready. We'll get started momentarily. Okay, so the clock tells me, the little fairy on the wall tells me that it's noon. So let's dive right in today. Well, first of all, thank you so much for coming to the first ever Ask Me Anything live stream. So today is all about answering your questions about developing in your organization people first strategies that will help you to unleash your employees' untapped potential. What am I talking about? To increase their performance and productivity in such a way that that drives the profitability in your firm up. By doing so, I'm going to talk quite a bit today about culture and organization. So do me a favor, if I could just ask if you all could use the chat and just throw into the chat what you think it means when we talk about a great place to work, as you define culture that way. And I want to make sure that we all have a similar frame of reference. Stop the share momentarily. I want to go into chat because I'm riveted to what your thoughts are. Okay, so please feel free to go into chat and share what you think it means in your organization to have a great place to work, a great culture. Okay, so without further ado, I'm just going to dive right into a conversation today about addressing any concerns, issues, thoughts, fears, hopes, desires you have with regard to developing an amazing workplace culture, and doing that by putting forward people first strategies. I want to start out by framing today's what the scope of today is about, right? So when we think of organizational structure, just please know we're at a crossroads. We're sitting here in 2025. We've just gone through COVID. We're experiencing Trump 2.0. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's going on. But I want to lay the foundation for what today is actually intended to accomplish. We are in, organizationally speaking, a state of significant transformation in American business and industry. So in the 20th century, in the 1900s, the model of American business structure, organizational structure, was a pyramid-shaped command control structure. It was by necessity. This is the structure that evolved in the 1900s in a industrial and manufacturing-based society. So if you kind of think about the prevailing mindset of any business, whether you're a 5-employee insurance firm or you're a multinational corporation of 50,000 based in upstate New York, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The structure of the organization was initially designed, the modern corporation, to have a few people at the top. That's your C-suite. Those are the people who exerted control. They made all the decisions. They had all of access to the finances. They were the few at the top. And then by necessity, there were layers and layers of, if you think about organizational foundation, laying a foundation structurally, there were by necessity layers of management that created a buffer between leadership at the top and frontline staff who are client facing. So this is the prevailing organizational structure that existed for the 20th century. And I'm here to tell you today, this model is dead. It's dying, and it no longer works. In its place is a fundamentally different structure. And what I mean by that is we're going from a world in which all of the control, all of the decision making used to be concentrated at the top, It's being dispersed. You call them now flat or matrix organizations. So the control is becoming decentralized into what some of the best organizations I've been fortunate to consult with. And if you study organizational development over the last few decades, the most successful organizations, General Electric, Samsung, Nucor Steel, they're all transforming their model from pyramid to flatter matrix organizations that are built on self-managed teams. So again, this model is what's happening and has been happening over the last 2+ decades in American business and industry. You may not have heard it. You may be fighting it. This may not be common knowledge, or you may not see this in the press all the time, but this is what is transforming now. And I see it every day in my consulting practice. I coach it. I've worked with 500 organizations. I talk to thought leaders in my Chasing the Dream podcast, where I interview kind of visionary leaders. This is the model because of a number of factors. The rate of transformational change in organizations being driven by technology, for starters. The reconstitution of the American workforce from being primarily driven by baby boomers and matures to now the largest two fastest growing segments are millennials, those born between 1980 and 1996, and Gen Zs born between 1996 and 2010. So there's a number of factors that are changing how business is done, from organizational structures, pyramid command control, to self-managed teams. And when you look at in your organization and other organizations, maybe you work with, maybe you know, maybe you've read about, the notion of self-managed teams in terms of when we talk about agile, the way that they're modeled, and this is whether it's Trader Joe's, whether it's Wegmans, whether it's DuPont, GE, Morningstar, the tomato company in Southern California, it doesn't matter. They're all predicated on agile teams, whereas the work comes in, you've got people who are already efficient at working together. There's no one person who's by default the project manager anymore. That notion of a team led by a de facto project lead is gone. And what happens is, in its place, there are people in your organization who are adept at different skills, functions, background, training, past experience. They will step in on a case-by-case basis and take over leadership of a team. What that means is, in the 21st century, the idea of a pre-existing pyramid with layers of bureaucracy and management, that's dead, that's dying. And these flatter self-managed team matrix organizations respond to the work as it comes in, so that you should not be hiring ever again. And this may sound confrontational, good. Everything I say today is confrontational, and I'm going to get to your questions, but by necessity, I needed to lay the foundation of what the motivation was for me to doing this. The people in your organization need to be empowered. They need to have the control of their work to be able to do the work individually and collectively in a way that will increase their performance and productivity and drive your profitability. So to get there, you cannot hire people off a job description anymore. You need to instead use behavioral interviewing as a technique for talent acquisition to go after people who have the attributes you're looking for. Critical thinkers, problem solvers. They work well independently, but they work well collaboratively. They're natural born leaders. And how do you do that? The shift in talent acquisition and recruiting also is in the process of significant transformation. It's no longer effective to say in the interview process, how might you handle a situation? Nobody cares. That's contrived. In the behavioral interviewing that you need to get agile teams driven by incredibly self-motivated, skilled people, you need to, in your recruiting and your interviewing, say, in the past, when you were faced with a situation like you will likely be faced if you join our team, how did you handle it? So the shift in mindset to build self-directed teams, agile teams, that do the work without any intervention with management, because in my parlance, management is a really dirty word. To get here from traditional team construction in maybe your current business to an ideal future of agile team construction, you need to hire people with the most amazing skill sets, behaviors, traits, characteristics. A job description won't help. 99% of what you need them to do on the job, you can teach them. But the precursor requirement is that they possess the grit, the drive, the determination, all those requisite rock star behaviors to be part of self-managed agile teams. So having said that, thank you everybody for coming in today. For those who just joined, welcome. And I'm going to answer any questions that you have about people strategies, developing people already on your team, looking for new people. But today's live stream is predicated on answering questions around people first strategies and also building an amazing workplace culture. So please, if you just joined, welcome. Use the chat to answer any questions. We'll talk them through, but today is an information share. My background is, just for those who may not know me very well, I see some people who I know, some folks not so much. I spent 20 years in corporate America. About 15 or so were in banking and financial services. So I had 2+ decades of experience being treated pretty horribly. Why? Because I was foolish enough to go get an MBA in marketing. And you may not be aware of this, but in most organizations, the two functions that are least understood and least respected, one is HR, and two is marketing. So after spending 20 years in corporate America, I started my consulting practice in 2009. I've worked with over 500 organizations, from global corporations in the US and outside. I've worked with thousands of entrepreneurs and founders and startups and pretty much everything in between. I've worked with for-profits, nonprofits, government entities. There are some universal truths to what's happening now in the American workplace. The number one truth is that the American workforce, whether or not you see this on the calm surface of what's going on today, it's going through massive restructuring. You have boomers and matures leaving the workplace every day, whether willingly or unwillingly, in the tens of thousands. In their place are millennials, those folks born between 1980 and 1996. And then you see Gen Zs born between 1996 and 2010. Those are fast becoming the two largest segments of the sixth generation workforce. Because don't forget, we have alphas who were born between 2010 and 2025. So alphas, the oldest ones, are 15, and some of them are coming in with summer work to do jobs in your company. So there's a massive restructuring of the American workforce, and companies need to start rethinking what they'll need for success in the era of Trump 2.0, in the era of post-COVID. And so that's what today is about. Let me just check and see if there are any questions. Culture is an environment. Communication is open. Thoughts shared freely and without preconceived notions. Absolutely, Michael. Culture, by the way, has nothing to do with you as the business owner, what you say it is. And it has nothing to do with what you ask marketing to brand. Culture is, and I've seen thousands of clinical definitions, but just to kind of the layman's definition of culture, culture is what your people feel. And believe it or not, culture starts the minute you extend an offer of employment. The minute you start that relationship, so before the onboarding or the orientation is the moment at which you decide that you are going to have a partnership with your employees. Notice I'm very specific on the word partnership. That notion of one person coming in and giving up all of her or his or their rights and privileges in the notion of getting what we call indentured servitude, a paycheck. It was slavery, a de facto slavery of an employee giving up all of their autonomy. That's dead. That's done. The new model of culture, what your people actually feel, is the environment you create. And so my question for everybody here today is, to the extent that you either work in an organization, you run an organization, you have influence in creating the culture, please think about what it is that you're doing to create an amazing culture. And by the way, you don't determine if it's amazing or shitty. Your people do. And how are you constantly having a communication? As Michael said, communication is open and it's constant. How are you constantly soliciting feedback? And by the way, I'd say that culture, in terms of communication, having transparency and honesty, that only takes you so far. Again, the meaning of empowering employees for them to perform as well as they can is you have to give over control completely. Well, that scares the bejesus out of a lot of business owners. And why? Because they're not trusting that the people that they're bringing in are capable of owning every aspect of their own work. That's on you as a founder or as somebody who's a CHRO or fractional CHRO to convey to your clients. So let me just go back in, please. Any questions that anybody has about an existing client you're working with, or possibly running your business? Maybe you're challenged. Maybe you're struggling with, gee, I don't know how to find these great Gen Z employees. And the way that we're communicating in this live stream is through the chat. So please, and also, by the way, note, if you don't have my contact details, I put them in the chat so you can follow up with me. I put a link to calendaring so we can schedule some time one-on-one. I want to share something, if I might. There's the notion of leadership. And please understand, when I say leadership, there's actually many different styles of leadership. But I want to be very specific. Bear with me 1 second, please. I'm having technical issues. Okay, so one of the things it bears discussion is this confusion around what it means to be a leader. In the same way people, especially those of you who are business owners, throw around these terms called culture, there is this sometimes confusion around what it means to lead versus what it means to manage. And in the state of a dying 20th century command control pyramid, which was necessary for the 20th century, and an industrial era and manufacturing where people left the farms to come work in the cities and get that hourly pay rate, which, unlike cultivating crops, it was guaranteed hourly salary. That pyramid, command control, is dying. In its place are flatter organizations where empowered employees, that there's a democratization of autonomy. People are taking ownership of their work. They're being given control of their work. So that's forcing us to come to understanding of, are you a leader or a manager? And allow me to say that most people are managers and they just don't understand this. So management, whether you're thinking about historically what the clinical definition of to manage is, whether it's Latin mano agere or whether it's French management, management is about control. It's about controlling employees as if they're assets. And by the way, if you think your employees are an asset, your business is going to die. Employees are not assets. As Gandhi said, it's beneath human dignity to assume or think that people are cogs in a machine. Employees are not assets. Managers consider employees assets. So management, when you're doing this thing called controlling your people, that's managing. And so what do I mean by controlling? Ask yourself a very, very serious question. If you are a business owner and or you're somebody in a position to influence a business, how do you have very, very honest meaningful conversations about their leadership team, in fact, not being leaders. Management is a way of saying we don't trust our people to have complete control over their work. So in other words, you don't allow them to determine 4 aspects of their work. This is the whole Daniel Pink autonomy model. First of all, you don't trust them enough to allow them to choose what they work on. You don't enable them to choose or decide how the work that they're responsible for is most effectively produced. You don't allow them to determine when they do their work. And you certainly don't allow them any degree of flexibility in where they work from. Because that means you're giving up control and or you don't trust them. That's management. In the 21st century, and by the way, that's dying. Whether you're in a business, a startup, a nonprofit, an NGO, doesn't matter. The notion of management is dying because the notion of the 20th century command control business structure is transforming because of reasons I said earlier. Leadership is what's required now. So leadership is about you knowing where your business is going. It's about knowing what the values are that your business stands for. It's about conveying your vision, your mission, your core values. And it's recruiting people who exhibit the behaviors, that are reflected in your core values. Leadership only happens, think about the word, it only happens when people are willing to come join your organization and by that mere act, say, I trust you enough to follow you. And that's powerful. So bear with me 1 second. I just want to kind of get rid of this. I want to go back to the chat. It's really important to understand how structurally businesses are changing. And if you're operating in a world, I don't care where you are, I don't care what your business model is, what you do, who your clients, the services, none of that matters. What I mean by that is the nature of work is transformed. The people who you rely on to do the work are different. They're not like us. I'm a Gen Xer. I was born in 67. So they're not boomers, matures, or Gen Xers. Most of the people that you're going to be bringing into your organization are millennials and Gen Zs. Their value construct is entirely different than ours. And I say different. I don't make a value judgment on better or worse. Maybe you do have a pejorative notion of Gen Zs are, and you're probably wrong. And what do I mean by that? Over the last 17 years of running my practice, I've actually taught in 12 colleges and universities, undergraduate, graduate. I've taught over 15,000 students. I can tell you what to look for in Gen Zs. I can tell you what not to look for. So that's the first cop-out. These people nowadays are lazy, they don't want to work. Yeah, that's a cop-out. There's a war on talent. No, there's not. The best places to work have no issues finding really talented people because they've built a reputational brand. Well, with Trump's war against Mexico and Canada and alienating Greenland and tariffs, and especially post-COVID, there's all of these supply chain issues. No, I'm sorry. Those may be structural economic challenges, but those shouldn't be people challenges. And the number one thing that makes me batshit crazy between us today is when somebody says to me some permutation of my people as a business owner, as a founder. How incredibly offensive is that from that mindset of these are my people? No, they're not. There are people who you were fortunate enough that they were willing to take a risk and come work with you. So when I hear people talk about strategy or technology, operational efficiency, AI, ChatGPT, EOS, integrators, implementers, when I hear people talking about strategy or technology as a competitive advantage, bullshit. There's only one lasting competitive advantage you have as a business owner. It's not your strategy, because strategy without great people gets you nowhere. And it's certainly not technological advantages or technology. Everybody has access to that. That's, in mathematical parlance, that's lowest common denominator is technology. That's an equalizer. That levels the playing field. Your people are going to help you exceed your business goals, or your people, because of who you're hiring, are going to hold you back. So let's talk about that. I want to go back into chat now that I've had kind of my soapbox. And okay, so Michael talked about culture. Please drop any questions you have in the chat if you need clarification. That's what this live stream is about, is having conversation around people strategies. So I'm just going to kind of wait for a minute as folks get a chance to queue up any questions or thoughts you're having, or maybe you're having a specific challenge. And this is a very kind of safe space to have an honest, transparent conversation in confidence. I'm going to go back and I'm going to check the chat again. And folks, I'm not seeing anybody putting stuff in the chat. Can you just take yourself off of mute and shout out that you can see the chat, that you have access to it?
I can see it, Ethan.
Okay, thank you.
I see the chat and I've added a couple of things.
Oh, okay, wonderful. Let me then go back in. Yeah, let me just kind of close this out and see if I can go back in. I'm not seeing anything from chat from anybody else. So let me just go back and refresh the chat and see if maybe. Nope. So again, for purposes of just really making this specific to what you are hoping to accomplish, if anybody's put something in chat, please just feel free to kind of talk it out loud and I'll jump right in. I'm sorry for the technical issues, but I'm not seeing anything on my end in the chat.
Yeah, my question was, where do you see manufacturing going?
Yeah, amazing question. Thank you. And so the notion of line staff is shifting. And what I mean by that is, I don't know if you may recall back in the 80s when the Japanese management model of Kaizen and Six Sigma and giving the employees the opportunity to pull the stop cord, on the assembly line, on the production side. They didn't honor that because in Japanese society, to do such a thing meant showing disrespect or showing that there was a flaw in the organization's planning. We've come full circle now. The organizations I've worked with, the manufacturing folks in that sector, they're all about empowerment of people. I mean, the model I always go back to, and I don't know if you're familiar with the Nucor Steel model, but it's also decades of kind of self-managed teams at GE and DuPont. I mean, they hire the same folks who, whether they're engineers or they're shift supervisors, or they've just got gobs of experience on a plant floor or in a shop doing similar work, they're doing the same concept of democratizing labor, meaning the people who are closest to the machines, the people who are closest to the work, understand better than the managers, the supervisors, or the folks in the ivory tower how to get the work done. So they're literally applying best practice around people empowerment to the manufacturing sector. It had to happen. And from my perspective, it's happening. Not as quickly as I'd like, but it's happening. I will say that it's an interesting observation. The folks that I work with in the manufacturing and the industrial sector, a lot of times what they'll say is, well, my people are technically competent, but they lack one of two things. They lack the soft skills, i.e. leadership skills or communication, or the non-technical skills. So they lack the soft skills, or they're not aware of the regulatory environment, either at the state or federal level. So we can't truly empower them because they're not aware of some of those industry sector specific considerations. Well, I call bullshit on that. I say both of those are opportunities to invest in your people. It's a pretty easy calculus that I do. I will ask when I go in and I do a workplace vitality audit, one of the first things I'll ask, not the leadership team, because they have no idea, they're going to give me spin. I ask the folks on the shop floor, how much control do you have over what you're doing, how you get it done, who you work with, and how you architect your own work? And they may say, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 is low control, 10 is complete control. They may say I have complete control, I have a 10, or they may say I have a 1. I'm finding that a lot of industrial manufacturing firms are still hesitant to give up control. So to me, that's a challenge, to be honest. And it needs to happen. One of the things I'll ask is when an organization says, we care about our people, I will say, what % of your revenue is kind of funneled back into your business for training and development? And they'll look at me like I have 3 heads. I'll say, well, if you're not investing in your people, how do you expect them to rise to the occasion? And they'll say, we hired them based on a set of skills. But especially manufacturing in the industrial sector, the pace of technological transformation is so great, you can't continue to hire people on outdated technology or outdated systems of processes. You want the people who are problem solvers and idea generators and innovators. I mean, that's the experience I got from teaching in 3 engineering colleges. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go back into chat, see if I'm seeing anything or I'm missing. Again, I'm not seeing, I apologize to anybody who's put a question in chat. Feel free to just shout it out. Whether it's people initiatives, culture creation, challenges you're facing with getting the most out of your people. So yeah, Michael, please go right ahead. I see you put your hand up, but feel free to just shout out whatever's on your mind.
Being Zoom etiquette, my friend. So, um, my challenge is I recruit insurance agents, get them onboarded, but I seem to be spinning my wheels and getting them to actually do something. Even though my industry is mostly 1099, they're independent contractors. They obviously don't answer to a boss per se, but we try very hard to make an environment that is very, very productive. And also culture is very big, and we treat everyone as a family member. Um, is it possibly that I'm coddling them too much and giving everything relying upon me to get them off the ground and just saying, hey, you got to have some salt and or some skin in the game, as they say, to get moving. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, and first of all, Michael, thank you so much for sharing. I mean, and being very transparent. The fact that when folks are coming in, you're kind of sitting there waiting for them to jump right in and be productive right out of the gate, and they're not, that, as you've identified, is problematic. And so, and we can go offline and have a conversation around how you are going through the process of finding people who are intrinsically motivated, meaning they're the kinds of people who don't want to wait to be told what to do. They're jumping right in and they're using whatever you're providing them as resources to be productive and perform and produce. You're missing something. So there's something that's a disconnect, and you say we treat our employees like a family. To be fair, that is one of the scariest phrases I've ever heard. People are not part of your family. And I understand where you're going with that, but the notion of they're not coming in and contributing right away, and you've identified a disconnect between what your expectations are and what their performance is, to me, that's revealing about your recruiting efforts, if I might. So I would go back and you and I can talk offline about what is it in your behavioral interviewing where you're not vetting them suitably in terms of revealing the extent to which they have demonstrated previously that they're proactive. Because that's what we want them to say. If they're in insurance and you're bringing them in to sell insurance, there's an expectation that they've done it before. So you can model in the interview process, you can say, show me a time where, as an insurance agent, you were faced with an issue that's likely to happen here at the Michael Payne Insurance Agency. How did you resolve that? Did it work? Yes or no? What did you learn? So but the other thing is, it sounds to me like you're missing an opportunity to recruit people who are inherently proactive. That's a key attribute you're looking for and you want to recruit for, and you want them to demonstrate by hitting the ground running. So I would just say we want to take a look at that. To anybody who heard me say the phrase, and welcome, Jack, to anybody who heard me say the phrase intrinsically motivated versus extrinsically motivated, the comparison is this. If I want the donkey to move or the jackass to move, I have two ends I can stimulate. I can whack them in the ass, or I can put a sugar cube or an apple in front of their mouth. Either way, I'm going to lead them forward. But that's extrinsic motivation. That's employee benefits, that's money, paid time off, it's gift cards. There's something extrinsic outside of them that motivates them to perform. That's where we want to take a look at each of your recruiting, hiring, talent acquisition practices to get away from recruiting people who are driven like that. And we want to look at people who are intrinsically motivated. Intrinsic motivation it's inside of me. So your job as a business owner, as a fractional CHRO, as an influencer who has a book of business clients who you need to give advice and counsel to, you want to set up their talent acquisition and recruiting to reveal intrinsically motivated individuals. Those are people who go out of their way to, by the way, come up with new ideas for your insurance agency to sell new services, to be more efficient, to do things more automated or efficient to reduce cost. They're the ones who, by and of themselves, are coming up with ideas to either improve your top line, come up with new products, new services, new markets, new client, ideal client profiles. So they're going to coming with creative solutions to generate new revenue for you or reduce cost, which reduce your expenses. So top line or bottom line, they're helping you improve your financial situation. How are you recruiting people based on exhibiting intrinsic motivation in their past performance? That's what you want to model in your talent acquisition. Okay, so to folks who just joined, please go ahead, throw anything, questions in the chat, or just shout out any questions, any issues, challenges you're dealing with. But then thank you, Michael, for sharing. We had talked offline before about the people that are coming in. You want them to hit the ground running. That's a motivation question, but it may also be an opportunity for you to revisit your communication with them during the interview process. The onboard, which is you extending the offer and then giving them the tools, resources, setting them up to be productive, and then the orientation, which is different than your onboarding. So there's three potential areas that we could tweak, right? The interview process, your recruiting, your onboarding, and your orientation. But honestly, everybody here should be, if you're in a recruiting role, those superhero, those Wakanda forever, key superhero attributes, one of them should be seeking individuals who are intrinsically motivated. For sure. Intrinsic motivation, effective communication, leadership, collaboration, critical thinking, problem solving, idea generation. Those are the skills you want to uncover in your top talent. Yeah. Any specific questions, challenges from folks who either just joined or maybe you're kind of thinking through?
Yes,
Some of the-
I have a couple of questions. It's Vince Tinto, Connecticut.
Yeah.
A couple of things came out of COVID. A couple of terms. We have hybrid. We have working remote. We have the concept of quiet quitting. How has that affected or changed the playing field when you consider hirees?
Oh my goodness, Vince, $1 million questions. So to kind of unpack that, the notion of work post-COVID in terms of the employee-employer contract. So hybrid versus remote, right? Those are options. And by the way, COVID didn't create those. Those were always in existence. There was a sense of resurgence and immediacy. A spotlight was shined on remote and hybrid work in a global pandemic that took over 1 million American lives, but it didn't start with COVID. So let's kind of, because quiet quitting is something entirely different, Vince, and equally critically important, so thank you. Hybrid versus remote, here's the thing. If you're Jamie Dimon and you say, everybody must come back to work, or if you say, everybody stays at home, you're missing a fundamental truism. You've just dismissed every element of individuality that's a prerequisite for building a strong relationship with your people. So one blanket HR policy, one blanket term of you all can work hybrid, oh, you can work 2 days a week, or you all stay remote, you're minimizing the individual wants, needs, desires, life considerations of each employee. So the reason that happens, Vince, is most business owners are lazy or they lack empathy. So they're not saying, I want to address each employee's needs differently. I'm going to have one policy that goes in the handbook. It makes it easy. My fractionless CHRO, update my employee handbook. I want language around work considerations. You should model a preferred work arrangement based on every employee's current state of where they are. I mean, I don't know if you've heard, Vince, but there's this phrase sandwich caregivers, and it's pretty much, it's still a majority are women, and they're in their 50s or thereabouts, Gen Xers, who have somebody who's older than them living with them and somebody younger than them living with them that they're care providers for. When you say to somebody like that, you have to work hybrid and I'm going to dictate the terms of when you come in based on when your team is coming in, and we're just going to make that a prerequisite for collaborative work, you make it virtually impossible for that sandwich care provider to balance work, life, family considerations. So the first thing I would say is I would suggest you revisit your policy around hybrid work and remote work. It's not just simply the function in your business. So let's say people on the assembly line or people in your call center. So it's not just a consideration of function, what the function is that that employee does. It's also a consideration for, are they new? We had a lot of, my daughter is going to be tomorrow 25. She's on her second job out of college. She went through the end of high school and college during COVID. When she graduated, and she's a badass, she's incredibly capable, self-motivated, all that good stuff. Her first employer right after COVID said, don't come in. Here's your laptop, stay at home. My daughter needed to be in an office. She needed to hear water cooler language. She needed to watch and model and emulate the behavior of the VIPs, the brand ambassadors, the most productive people. She needed to model what acceptable team and culture. She needed the hands-on in-person coaching and mentoring. And they told her, blanket statement, you and everybody else, you're new, stay at home. So that's a failure. So the notion of hybrid versus remote, revisit it, please, with an element of sensitivity in terms of empathy towards what do your people need and want, and how do you work with them individually. The other thing, Vince, you said, and I wanted to kind of unpack that separately, quiet quitting is not new. It's just bullshit managers and these bullshit consultants come up with these phrases because they're lazy. Quiet quitting has been around forever, since we started measuring organizational culture post-World War II. The notion of quiet quitting is this: I'm still stuck working here for the time being until I update my LinkedIn profile, my resume, get another job offer, retire, whatever. I'm emotionally checking out because I saw how you treated my peers. You initiated layoffs. You don't give cost of living adjustments. You don't do any career and professional development training. You don't solicit my ideas. There's no feedback. You haven't given us an employee evaluation. I'm not in control of my own work. You know what, Vince? I'm emotionally checked out. I'm going to do the bare minimum. I'm not going to solve problems that I think I can. I'm not going to volunteer on exciting new projects. I've checked out emotionally. And the reason I've checked out emotionally is not because I'm a bad employee. It's because you did something or didn't do something. So how do you identify that? You can't. Other than I would say, if there's an employee who historically has exhibited track record of contributions, they volunteered to start employee resource groups, or they created a Slack channel for communication, or they offered their time and service to do coaching and mentoring. If they've historically been active in your organization, doing things outside of the scope of their roles and responsibilities, and all of a sudden they're not, that's a clear indication they've checked out. They are quiet quitting. If there are people who you have teams and they were actively engaged on teams, self-managed teams, and now all of a sudden it's like whacking the donkey to get them to move to be proactive, they're quiet quitting. And that's, to be honest, a really good indication that you have an opportunity to revisit your culture. Because people who have said, I'm done, they've checked out emotionally, they're typically your rock stars. The people who are quiet quitting are, it's implicit that those are quite often the people who are the greatest contributors, and now they're not. And then the question you ask is not, why aren't they contributing? The question actually is, what have I done or not done to make them react? Because that's a reaction. Thank you, Vince, for your honesty. I hope I kind of, okay, so Jack, in your experience, what's a leadership cliche that organizations still cling to, even though it's clearly doing, oh, Jack, man, you're a rock star. Well, what are leadership cliches? Well, before you joined, Jack, somebody mentioned earlier, we treat our people like family. The things that I hear right now are, it's less about leadership and more about excuses. And I'll tell you when the excuses started. Oh, goodness, Donald Trump is running for president again. Who knows what's going to happen? Let's wait and see until the election. That was last year, obviously. Oh my goodness, the election happened. Who would have expected that outcome? It's November. Let's wait until the new year. Okay, it's the new year. We see his administration. They're implementing their 2050 project initiative. Who knows what's going to happen? You know what? We're going to war with Canada tomorrow. We're launching missiles at, it's just this pervasive litany of excuses that are made to inactivity. And I call it the stagnation of fear. So business leaders, who aren't really leaders, we throw that term around, they're control freaks. They're not making decisions because they're burying their head in the sands. They see risk, chaos, uncertainty, and then there's a requisite fear of action. So I'll just ride it out. You're losing opportunity, you're increasing the likelihood you're going to get run over. So that leadership cliche is, let's just wait and see. That number one cliche is inactivity brought on by excuses. The other leadership cliche, and I love the question, Jack, but I don't think it's a sign of leadership. I think it's a sign of a dereliction of duty or abrogation of responsibility, is when somebody who's in a position of authority starts to make excuses. Gen Zs nowadays, these college graduates, they're not this or they're this. Those are excuses. When somebody says there's a war on talent or it's hard to get the best employees, no, it's not. Sorry. It's not hard for the best organizations. Go look at Ethisphere or Great Place to Work, those annual lists of the best places to work. They've created strong reputational brands around a great culture. The top talent flocks there like moths to a flame because they know that organization. There's a reason why British Petroleum struggles or Bank of America or Wells Fargo struggles, but places like, World Central Kitchen and Patagonia and Kind and Chobani and Honest Tea and Chewy, they have no issues getting top talent because they have reputational street cred. I just want to think through Jack's question, folks. Just please honor me, humor me. Are there any leadership cliches that's clearly doing more harm than good? I'd love to know what you all think about leadership cliches, but I'll be very honest. Most of what we would say leaders are saying, they're not leaders. The only way to get people to perform at the highest level is to find the best people who have demonstrated a track record of success, bring them into your organization, give them complete autonomy, control, and support them to unleash their untapped potential. I actually do have a leadership cliche, Jack. The reason that I, as a business owner, I've heard this a gazillion times, the reason why I don't fully trust my people, that I don't give up control to my people, if I let them decide when they work, who they work with, how they get the work done, where they do the work from, it won't get done. That's an indication, that's a cliche, but it's an admission that you don't trust your people. And why don't you trust your people? It has nothing to do with your people. It's on you as an owner, or you not being you, but whoever is saying that. And I hear that pretty much every day, or if not every day, several times every week. I want to be sensitive to time. We have 10 more minutes, so we're good. Any questions, follow-up, concerns, things you're thinking about or struggling with, or maybe you want to seize an opportunity and you're just not sure how to go about it? And I am recording this session, by the way, for those who joined after we started, so I will have the link available if you want to listen at your own leisure. And we are doing this weekly. So we're going to do it every Wednesday at noon Eastern. I just want to, if I might, please bear with me a second. Okay. So, okay. So I talked about before the notion of leadership versus managing. Gotta love technology. I'm struggling to actually pop up a slide. So bear with me 1 second. I'm gonna go back in, try it one more time. There was something that I wanted to actually mention. So, okay. Can everybody see the slide that says management leadership? Can you just shout out? I don't have my chat open.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Michael. So I do want to just jump forward. This is about you now. To the extent that anybody here has people underneath her or him, and you are a leader manager, there's no one kind of style, and none are better than any others. Well, there's one that's better, but for the most part, these are practical realities that take into consideration your comfort level, your personality of interacting with others based on your personality and your preferred communication style. So the autocrat, my way or the highway. I don't care what your opinions are, your past experience. We're going to do it this way. You need to follow. I'm the leader. I'm the boss. I'm in charge. I know better. My name is on the masthead. The autocrat is in complete control, and she or he, they feel very uncomfortable giving up, ceding any of that control. The bureaucrat is somebody who, usually, if it's not personality driven, you're in a very heavily regulated industry. The bureaucrat is all of the processes, systems, forms have to be signed the right way, in the right order. There's a structure, there's a process in place for that. Charisma is the cult of leadership. It's the people with the strong extroverted personalities. They typically come from sales roles as rainmakers. Charismatic leaders have the will of personality to get other people to follow. People are drawn to them. Democratic or participative leaders, they're the kinds of individuals who don't feel comfortable unless they've heard from everybody. They're willing to take longer to make a decision to reach consensus. They want other folks around them to participate. And this is a blessing because if we know anything about the dynamics of the American workforce, we know approximately 30% of the American workers are introverted in nature, so they don't feel comfortable speaking out. So democratic participative leaders give more opportunities for folks who may not feel comfortable speaking to provide insights through writing or ideas that way. Transformational leaders are not happy with the state of your business or the world the way it is. They have a vision of the way the world can be, the business can be, and they share that vision constantly. But there are other kinds of management style. These are not all leadership. I'm very specific. Leading is not managing. Managing is controlling people. Leadership is setting a course. Laissez-faire or delegative, no, that's fine. You go right ahead. I'm not going to be a bottleneck. I won't slow you down. You go ahead and submit that idea. But when something goes wrong, I'm going to roll the bus right over you. I told you not to do that. Look, she chose to do that. So a delegative management style is predicated on letting people do their own thing, not giving them coaching, mentoring, advice, and counsel. And when people invariably hit speed bumps, you kind of throw them under the bus. People relations oriented, we used to call this in the 1980s management by walking around. These are the people who need to check in on everybody. I'm a lot like that. We need the communication feedback loops. We need to be oriented to speaking to other people. And you may find yourself, yeah, I'm a little bit like this or that. Task oriented is getting work done. You have your list of to-dos. You have everything in front of you for the day, in the week. You love checking off the things you've done. Task-oriented is more tactical and less strategic in nature. Transactional is not about building long-term relationships with your people. It's about having work-related engagements vis-a-vis you and/or them as owner contributors in work. And work is a series of roles and responsibilities, or in this case, we call them transactions. So it's not about building deeper relationship. The last is something that's come about in the 21st century, which is a whole new model. And Gen Zs and Millennials are demanding your organization shift your focus to this, which is, you may have heard that historically, those companies who were in business to make money, they were for profit. And those organizations who existed to serve community stakeholders, those were nonprofits. There's a new model based on probity, which is morals and ethical behavior and caring about people and the planet. There's a new phrase. You may have heard it. It's called profit with a purpose, or triple bottom line. It goes by a lot of things, but it's a new ethical model of leadership to make the world a better place. It goes hand in hand, by the way, with transformational leaders. So the question you ask yourself is, in order for you to lead the ship forward of your business success, or if you're a fractional and you get hired to come in and provide strategic guidance on how to navigate your clients to a successful future, it starts with, where are you in the two axes? The x-axis going left to right. Are you transactional? Do you literally just interact with people to get the work done? Or do you want, there's a phrase, if I have seen farther, it's by standing on the shoulders of giants, Sir Isaac Newton. Are you transformational? A rising tide lifts all boats. Where are you on the continuum of transactional versus transformational? And then on the y-axis, the other consideration is, how are you in terms of relationship cultivation with your team? Are you the autocrat, meaning my way or the highway, or are you democratic? We want everybody to participate and all voices matter. So it's just something I wanted to share in terms of, and by the way, where you end up on this continuum, there's no right, there's no wrong, there's no good, there's no bad. You just should know your personality style, how it influences your preferred communication style. So I'm DISC certified. I do the DISC personality assessment. I do this for individuals and their teams. So if this is something you're interested in, we can certainly talk about it. I can set you up to do a DISC, but just know where you are on this range of behaviors. So that was the other thing that I wanted to share as we kind of come up, as we're approaching the end of our time together. So in the last 2 minutes, there is something that I wanted to share, one more thing. Just because I don't know if you're aware that these exist. So please bear with me 1 second. I just want to pull up one more. Okay, can you just shout out that you can see the PowerPoint that I started with? It says traditional teams.
Yes, you can see it.
Okay, great, thank you. So I do want to end with, if you're interested, this video, these conversations, these topics, they're all critically important to your ability to lead your business or provide strategic guidance to your clients. I've got over 580 videos I've created in my YouTube channel. Please feel free to check out the Chazin group on YouTube. There's a ton of videos that are put into different playlists. I also have 50 episodes of my podcast where I speak to thought leaders who themselves are building great places to work. And the other thing I want to just, before we leave today, my 20 years in corporate America and my 17 years coaching and consulting, that's given me a perspective in terms of working in organizations, toxic versus amazing cultures, and as a consultant, guiding organizations. But please know that I also spent a decade researching a question that was bothering me that I took 10 years to figure out. And that was my second book. Are there any attributes or characteristics of the most successful companies anywhere in the world that we could point to and say that's the reason why they outperform their competitors? So I had an idea. I started to research it. I thought it would take a few months. It ended up being 10 years. But I looked in over 200 countries and 7,000 companies across every conceivable industry sector. 20th century, 21st, technology, manufacturing, all of them. And I looked at all of the companies that were either the first or second top performer financially in their respective industry sector. And I discovered that there was only one quality or characteristic of any amazing, highly successful organization that set itself up for lasting competitive advantage. And you can kind of tell from the title, it's called the compassionate organization. The reality is there is only one characteristic that is a true indication of an organization's ability to grow and prosper and navigate through chaotic and uncertain times, whether it's COVID or our current political economic climate. There's only one characteristic that all great organizations share, and it's an amazing culture. And again, we as business owners, you as a business owner, you don't get to determine whether you have a great place to work. You don't make that determination. Your people do. So we're coming up just past the hour. Thank you so much for taking time to come out to our first ever Ask Me Anything. I'll be doing this on a weekly basis. Please reach out to me if you have any further questions or you want to have a follow-up conversation. Before we go, any questions, any observations? Is there anything anybody wants to know before we get off the phone or the video together? I don't know why I'm not seeing chat. My apologies. So if you have a question, or please just shout it out.
Thank you for your time, my friend.
All righty, everybody. Best of luck. Keep fighting the good fight. And remember, your people always come first. When in doubt, ask, what can I do for my people in this relationship of equals to unleash their untapped potential? Because you hired them to do a job, but they bring to the table so much more potential that's not being leveraged for advantage. Thank you so much. Take care. Be well. Bye-bye. Hey, Jack, I do want to follow up with you at some point.